Charles Leclerc dominance on the opening day of the Monaco Grand Prix as Ferrari enjoy their best day of 2025 so far. From Racing News 365, my name is Nick Golding, and I'm delighted to be joined, as always, by lead editor Ian Parks, who has yet again gone above and beyond with his background. Ian, looks spectacular, but I want to start by going back to Thursday's media session with Charles Leclerc and him downright downplaying Ferrari's chances, saying we're not going to be in the hunt this weekend, the car just won't work. Fast forward to post FP2 on Friday, and he topped FP1. He topped FP2. Okay, an eventful start to FP1 for him, but I mean, it does look like Charles Leclerc is the favourite in Monaco.
It's bizarre, isn't it, Nick? But not quite so bizarre when you think about it, because, yes, Charles downplayed the fact that Ferrari was going to do well around this circuit, bemoaning the fact that its underlining weakness was the fact that it was not good in slow speed corners. Well, we know full well that Monaco is all about slow speed corners, but there are only slow speed corners around Monaco. So if you go about setting up the car correctly, you can get it to work around the lap, because that's all you are trying to focus on. Now, for all of Charles Leclerc's bemoaning beforehand about the fact that he wouldn't go well here, even in FP1, after he'd had his crash, and we'll just get onto that in a little bit, after he'd had his moment after 8 minutes running into the back of Lance Stroll, he bemoaned the fact that the car wasn't working, understeer throughout, and literally not happy. Yeah, what happened? He topped FP1, as you say. He then went and topped FP2. Very close, nevertheless, with Oscar Piastri right behind him. But the good news from Ferrari fans is that Lewis Hamilton was right there as well, just a tenth of a second behind Charles in third place at the end of FP2. So looking good for Ferrari, the fact that it's not just one driver up there at the moment, the fact that they've got two. Let's caveat it, as always, by the fact that this is only Friday practice. We know there is going to be so much more to come from the drivers, from the teams in FP3, and of course, going into qualifying. But right now, as it stands, Ferrari looking good around a track where they thought they were not going to look good.
And actually, as you pointed out, Oscar Piastri was the closest driver to Leclerc, but interestingly, Piastri was the only non-Ferrari driver within 0.3 of a second of Leclerc. So that highlights really Ferrari's really good pace on Friday. But very quickly, do you want to talk about...
Nick, it was 0.03 of a second, not 0.3.
I was saying that it was only Piastri who was within the only non-Ferrari driver within 0.3 of Leclerc. Norris in fourth was obviously 0.3 adrift. Sorry, it should have been a bit clearer. My bad. Be all right. 0.03 was Piastri's deficit to Leclerc. But very quickly, do you want to talk about what happened at the start of FP1 between Leclerc, of all people, and Lance Stroll?
8 minutes in. We know Monaco's renowned for the possibility of incidents, but 8 minutes, that was going something, it has to be said. But yeah, Lance Stroll appeared at the time to be getting out of the way of Kimi Antonelli, going into the Lowe's heck, did so, moved over. But as he tried to move back onto the racing line to maneuver around what is a very tight left-hand sweep, as we know, 50 kilometers an hour to get around there, which is going some in these cars, because we know just how difficult it is to go that slow in a Formula One car. Nevertheless, as he moved back round onto the racing line, Charles Leclerc coming in right behind him, clattered into the back. Damage to both cars, enough to force Lance out of the remainder of FP1, enough to force Charles back into the garage for a new front wing. Just about managed to make it back, because as he was trying to get back to the garage, half the front wing came off, dislodged underneath his car. So he was quite fortunate in that respect that he managed to get back. And more importantly, that he didn't deposit that front wing over the track, because as we have seen in the past, when a driver is driving what sometimes the stewards have determined a dangerous car, and it could be determined that that was the case. Thankfully for Charles, as I say, the half of front wing stayed lodged underneath his car, didn't spew out to the side onto the track, and he managed to make it back, get back out on track again, and set that fastest lap in FP1, despite the fact we heard these moans over the radio that he wasn't happy. It's very Max Verstappen-esque, I have to say, the way Charles was bemoaning his session. But unlike Max Verstappen, and I know we're going to come on to him in a second as
Yeah.
well, Charles at least managed to put that car in a good place. Top of the times, FP1, FP2. Max, it's another one of those Fridays for him and Red Bull, 10th and 11th for Max and Yuki Tsunoda on the timesheet, where they appear to have an awful lot of ground to make up. Now, we've seen across the 7 Grand Prix so far this season, Fridays have not been good for Max and Red Bull. But come Saturday, transformation, and we have seen Max more often than not fighting right at the front once again come qualifying. So I am fully expecting Max and Red Bull to be in the mix going into qualifying alongside both Ferraris and both McLarens.
What's fascinating today is that in typical Monaco fashion, we had 3 red flags, 1 in FP1 for the incident you just discussed between Lance Stroll and Charles Leclerc, 2 in FP2, one of which was for the second fastest driver today, Oscar Piastri at Sandoval. And I mean, Oscar, 300ths slower than Leclerc by the end, clearly, with the exception of Lewis Hamilton, the closest driver, it seems, to Leclerc and Ferrari's pace.
Yeah, once again, Lando Norris just a little bit off, wasn't he, Nick?
3 tenths.
Yeah, exactly. Just over 3/10 of a second. So, it's one of those, are we going to expect more from Lando? You would assume so. But we've seen these little struggles that he's had over these past few races. And you got to wonder now, is Oscar just starting to get into his head a little bit? And at this stage of the season, when Lando needs to be fully focused on himself, what he can do with the car, ignoring what's going on the other side of the garage. As I say, he's come out with these comments that when he's made these mistakes and he's beating himself up a little bit mentally after particular sessions, and qualifying especially, as we know, has often been a little bit of a bête noire for Lando at times, and when he's made these slight errors, and that's pitched him back, as we saw at the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix just last weekend. He made a couple of errors in Q3, and that was enough to keep him off the pace and behind both Oscar and Max Verstappen, of course. So he's got a lot of work to do, Lando, here. Not just this weekend, but you've got to feel overall as well, if he is to really thrust himself back into the fight alongside his teammate. Now, don't get me wrong, there's 13 points between them. There is an awful long way to go, but it's just these little signs, isn't it, that we keep on seeing from Lando, that you've got to wonder, what is it all about inside his head? Can he get on top of things mentally to ensure going forward he's going to be there challenging Oscar right at the front, week in, week out, or Grand Prix in, Grand Prix out, at least anyway. As I say, it's still only Friday, but he's got a little bit of pace to find, as we can see, just around a third of a second. Still not going to roll him out because, as we know, it's Monaco. Anything can happen.
Just to very quickly go through the top 10 from Friday, and as we've just discussed, Leclerc was at the top of the timesheets with Piastri in second, Lewis Hamilton in third, Lando Norris fourth, Liam Lawson in fifth, who we'll discuss in a moment, Isaac Hadjar in sixth, Fernando Alonso seventh, Alex Albon eighth, Kimi Antonelli in P9 with Max Verstappen in P10, Tsunoda was 11th, George Russell 12th. But Racing Bulls, I mean, with the exception of Ferrari, one of the big surprises of the day, both Liam and Isaac ahead of both Red Bull drivers. Isaac, a very, very mixed day for him, of course, excellent pace, but messy at times, was actually the reason for the other red flag of the day. But Liam, I mean, this is the best he's looked, arguably, all season.
You got to think Liam is going to be coming out of this session buzzing, because it's been a really tough year for Liam Lawson. As we know, ditched by Red Bull after just 2 Grand Prix, the team believing that actually they'd made a mistake, even though they never actually came out and said, we've made a mistake. But they felt that, in all honesty, Liam was not quite ready to be propelled into that Red Bull seat. They needed somebody of greater consistency who they felt could push the car forward, then be alongside Max. And we're still waiting for Yuki Tsunoda to do that, of course, even though Yuki has now had these 5 Grand Prix as Max's teammate. Yuki was at least close to Max at the end of the session, but that's not where Red Bull want to be in 10th and 11th positions, respectively. But for Liam Lawson, yes, a great session. Now, can he carry this through into the all-important qualifying? That's going to be the biggest question. If he can do that, boy, will that be an absolute tonic for him. Because, as I say, it's been a real rough ride. He's not scored a point yet. We know he's got the capability. We've seen it in the past across his 2 previous sessions with the sister Red Bull team at AlphaTauri, of course, and at RV last year. So, as I say, it's there. It's within him. He's yet to extract that. And you got to feel, even though he says it's not been the case, you still get the feeling that what happened at Red Bull has just played on his mind a little bit. And it's taken this amount of time for him to try and fully regain that confidence that he had from previously. But he's there. He's thereabouts. He's in the mix. So it seems, going into qualifying. We know that these cars are nowhere near yet full qualifying pace compared to last year's times. Charles Leclerc's best lap in FP2 was I think just under a second off the actual his pole position time from a year ago. And we know that coming into this weekend as well, we've got the C6 compound being used at this circuit, which is the softest in Pirelli's range. It's a new tyre that they've developed for this season. We saw it in effect in Imola last Grand Prix. We know there is so much more to come from it. So I'm fully expecting the pole position time on Saturday to be a lot quicker than the 1:10.3 that we saw from Charles when he set that pole position last year before going on to victory. But for Racing Bulls, for both Liam and Isaac, and yes, a tough FP2 for Isaac, causing 1 red flag, another incident later in the session as well that ended his running, but nevertheless, he was right behind Liam. So a good session for Racing Bulls. Again, caveat, it's only Friday. They've now got to carry on and push this forward into FP3 and qualifying.
And just finally, Ian, when you look at the big 4 teams, it wasn't only Red Bull who struggled. Mercedes actually had a more difficult day than Red Bull, on a day as well where Toto Wolff's been discussing George Russell's contract situation. But I mean, based on Friday, that's probably the last of George's concerns right now.
George's contract situation. And I also thought quite pertinently, Kimi Antonelli and what Kimi Antonelli experienced during the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. As we know, that was Kimi's home race. Born in Bologna, just 30 minutes down the road. Massive fan of Bologna FC that had won the Coppa Italia just a few days previously. He'd gone and attended that race. He came into it on a high. But Toto said that they'd loaded too much upon him. Bearing in mind, it was his home race. So many commitments, sponsors, media. He'd brought family and friends. He'd brought his schoolmates across into the paddock. And Toto came out and said that by Saturday afternoon, Kimi had said to him, I'm burned out. I've got nothing left. And we pretty much saw that in qualifying and in the Grand Prix in particular. It just was not his weekend. A lot to learn, says Toto. Those lessons will have been learned, and those mistakes will not be repeated going forward. So you can expect, come the Italian Grand Prix later in the year in September, Kimi will have a lot quieter weekend come his commitments, and hopefully Kimi will be able to produce his best on home soil for that race. George Russell, as you say, I'd ask Toto Wolff the question. In the FIA press conference, the team principal's press conference, Toto was joined by Andy Cowell, Aston Martin team principal, and James Vowles, Williams team principal. It was a bit of a Mercedes loving, bearing in mind those 3 all used to be at Mercedes, of course. James as chief strategist and Andy Cowell as the engine guru that truly thrust Mercedes into its dominance from 2014 onwards, when we had those 1.6 litre turbocharged power units introduced into F1. So here we had a little bit of a reunion for these guys. But asked Toto the question in particular about George, about his contract. Max Verstappen's name is constantly been coming up, as we've seen over these past few months, despite the fact that, George and Toto have been expressed confidence that they would get things together, and George put pen on paper through an extension. Toto has said that, as far as he's concerned, it's not going to be another few months. If you remember back, cast your mind back to last year, it was September, the Italian Grand Prix, that Kimi Antonelli was finally confirmed as George's teammate. It's not going to be the case this time around. That's not the road that Toto and George are heading towards. We can expect something far quicker than that.
Well, only time will tell. Ian, amazing stuff. As always, of course, for those who have been watching this F1 update, please do comment below who you think is going to claim pole position on Saturday. I'm very intrigued to know who you think is going to get P1. And of course, make sure to join Ian and I after qualifying on Saturday as we dissect all the big talking points. If you can please smash that like button and subscribe to the channel, that would be absolutely amazing. Ian and I will see you after qualifying on Saturday. See you later.
Stay tuned, folks, for what is undoubtedly the best qualifying session of the year. It promises to be a thriller. Thanks as always. Take care.